feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled Movie Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Margin.
Matt, I just can't get enough of The Last of Us and Linda Ronstadt. Can you help me? Can I get
I
more?
can help you. You can get more because today we are reviewing Ethan Coen's Drive Away Dolls. Yes, the Coen brothers have split. We have one going to do Macbeth, one doing Drive Away Dolls. We'll get into our opinions on if we feel like they should stay split up or go back together, because both of those movies didn't quite work for me, spoiler alert. And I feel like I like my Coens together and not separate. But Eric, how are you?
Matt, I'm okay. We've gotten to that point where we're about to hit March, and it feels actually more overwhelming in the first couple of months of 2024 than it was in almost all of 2023. Just in terms of, I mean, you've got school right now, and I've got some sort of life stuff that's going on, so that seems to be really getting in the way of kind of just the enjoyment of everything. But on the plus side, we're taking our time to review certain things, and I think that actually helps, where
Yeah.
you get time to think about the movies you're watching a little bit more and reflect on them before actually reviewing them. And you have a really wonderful review up with the Kind of Funny guys for Dune in review, if people want to check that out as well.
Yes, people might have seen my tweet. People might have infamously listened or watched to Eric and I's review of Dune Part 1 during the 2021 Toronto International Film Festival. Did I do a complete 180 on the movie? I don't know. You'll have to go listen to that
You're keeping
podcast
it
or go on my
spicy.
Twitter. So yeah, I'd love if you guys head over to Kind of Funny in review. My first in review, which is kind of cool because in review is my favorite Kind of Funny podcast. I've been listening to it forever. And obviously I've popped on Screencast and other things with those guys before just to do kind of one-off reviews. But going on in review and doing a series has always been, a goal of mine. So that's really cool that Tim hit me up and I jumped over and did that review with Tim, Kevin, and Nick. So yeah, fun. It's it's an intense movie, both part 1 and part 2. We'll be reviewing part 2 soon, this Friday. So the reviews maybe aren't as light as they are sometimes with them, and goofy and funny, but still tried to bring some laughs and some good commentary to that movie. So yeah, it's been and going back to your other point, Eric, it's been an interesting start to 2024. I feel like a little bit of a slow start, but January and February are always a little bit slow to get rolling. We do have releases every week, but in the state that we're in right now of both of us, I'm focusing on school, like you said. You got stuff going on. Everyone's got stuff going on in their lives, but we're trying to just review the stuff we want to review and not force ourselves to review something that we're maybe not interested in talking about, or I just haven't had time to go see because it hasn't interested me too much. But Drive Away Dolls being the first one released on late February, just kind of a week or so ago, or no, actually this past Friday here in Canada,
Yep.
right?
It
Like,
kind of
yeah,
feels like it was longer because
because
probably
we
the,
saw
the,
it
the
a
press
while ago.
screening, and then
Yeah.
also it's not doing very well,
Yeah.
which isn't necessarily a surprise. I think this has cult status written all over it.
True.
And speaking of rolling, the best way to probably watch this movie is a little
some
bit on that
spice.
420,
On
baby.
that spice, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was the first film in 2024 if you go, okay, a Coen brother, maybe not a Coen brothers movie, is coming out in February.
You can only afford one in
I
this economy.
Yeah, I very much want to check that out. Unfortunate, like you said, I haven't really looked at the box office or anything, but let's get into it. I know I was a little bit, I came off a little negative saying both Coen brothers singular efforts didn't really work for me. That's not entirely true with this movie. I'm a little bit more mixed on it. It could be a little mixed negative. It could lean mixed positive. I don't know exactly where I land still, even a couple weeks removed from seeing it. But Eric, in case people haven't seen it or anything, I'm going to kick it over to you. What is Drive Away Dolls and what you think of it?
Yeah, and I also think we should sort of set this up in a context that makes sense in terms of uh who deserves credit here, because
Sure.
even though Ethan Coen is the director on this film, the credited director, his um partner in life, Trisha Cook, um I think has equal responsibility in terms of writing the script. She's the editor, she helped produce it, and there's, with the Coen brothers, there was always this legal snafu with the Directors Guild, where the Coens at a certain time in their career weren't an established duo, so they couldn't share the directing credit for their earlier movies, Blood Simple, Raising Arizona, up until around The Man Who Wasn't There. So I think this is the same thing where I think both Ethan Coen and Trisha Cook deserve credit for putting this together. And what they've created is basically a psychedelic road trip, where you have two lesbian friends who decide to hit the road in a drive-away car, a Dodge Aries. They're played by Margaret Qualley and Geraldine Viswanathan. But as they kind of hit the road, they don't realize that they're actually embroiled in a crime scenario where they're being sort of chased by a group that's working for a corrupt senator. So within this, comedy ensues, but it's comedy in that kind of Cohen brother vernacular of being very dry and dark, but still almost Three Stooges, Looney Tune esque in a way. Like, you think about, there are certain scenes in this movie, and this is a script that was originally written in 2001, 2002, so it's been kicking around for a while, and you can actually see that the DNA of the Coens, not just Ethan, are very much implemented into it. So whether you have, the kind of chatty henchmen that are going back and forth that are very memorable in something like Fargo, or sort of, sexuality and sort of uh, the voyeuristic nature of characters in something like A Serious Man. Like, there are elements within this script that feel very much a part of what we've seen in the Coen brothers world. And what really does work here is that it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's only around 84 minutes long, and it feels like it's in tune with the Looney Tunes in that way, where you're almost getting an extended short film where you have
Yeah.
these two characters being put into sort of increasingly awkward and uncomfortable situations that escalate maybe a little bit of danger, with a social commentary on the time, because it takes place in 1999. They're driving from Philadelphia to Florida. This is a point where, the Clinton era was ending, and we were coming up to an election year like this year. And you see that both, characters are talking a little bit about Ralph Nader, and sort of what's going on about the sort of the southern part of the U.S. and how it's not as evolved or progressive compared to Philadelphia. And you have um, one of the characters, Margaret Qualley's Jamie, is a Texan, and she really commits to the
Yeah.
bit. So it's a
She does, yeah.
it's a sex positive sort of road trip comedy that very much feels of a different time when it comes to the sense of humor. Like, it borders on almost pushing the bit to as far as it can go and past the point of no return. So you have this kind of 1960s, 70s psychedelia to it all. And that might not be, obviously, that might not be for everybody in terms of what comedy is today. But there are times where I think we both laughed
For sure.
at very absurd moments, especially with some of the visual gags.
Yeah, some of the most unhinged editing I've seen in a long
Exactly.
time.
Yeah. It feels like Trisha Cook took a bong hit
Yeah.
before, editing, and just was like, you know what, I'm gonna do every single edit that's available to me on whatever I'm working on in terms
Yeah.
of the editing system.
Yeah.
Like I was waiting for a star swipe, like it was that
No, that's
evident.
exactly it. Yeah, and I think that's where my mixed positive to mixed negative, I fall somewhere in the middle here where um I kind of alluded to it. Like I think I like my Coen brothers, as a pair rather than separate. And I think that's because they balance each other out. And some of my favorite Coen stuff leans towards the more serious that has that hint of humor throughout that you can kind of see that they double, triple, quadruple down on Trisha and Ethan in this movie. So I think when you see these duos split up, I feel like sometimes they're not worst qualities because that sounds too harsh, but they lean into what they really love. And I feel like they don't have the other one to rein them in a little bit. And I think that was my issue with this movie. It very much feels like a Coen Brothers movie. You have kind of the greatest hits. You got a briefcase with something in it that someone randomly finds, and you have some goons chasing after them to try to get it from them. And it's this like, and the humor is there, and the accents, and like everything you would expect to see in kind of a Coen brother movie, that you're kind of getting that here. I just think it's leaning so far down that slapsticky kind of, like you said, Three Stooges, Looney Tunes kind of humor, that the balance feels off. It's not that I didn't enjoy it. I laughed throughout with you. I think some of the reveals of what's in the briefcase and just some of the sex positive humor and just everything going on, like, it is very zany. And I think the editing, I at first I was like, Jesus Christ, what is this? And like, and then after a while I'm like, you know what, I'm here for it. Give me the most unhinged edit you could ever possibly get. And for some reason, the movie commits to that, and I kind of applaud them for that. um, that being said, it doesn't always work for me. Like, I think, Margaret Qualley's accent comes and goes. Like, she
Looking like
does.
Timothy Chalamet
Yeah,
here.
she's looking like Timothy Chalamet. I mentioned that to you while we were watching the movie. But I love seeing someone like Bill Camp, who feels like, I can't believe he hasn't been in a Coen Brothers movie
Also
before. And
falling
there's,
into the Three Stooges thing because his name is
yeah,
Curly.
exactly. And I think that is a obvious, homage, and kind of pointing towards what we were feeling watching it. But, then you get from the unhinged editing to these kind of these psychedelic interstitials with Miley Cyrus. And then it drops the zany editing and then does these interstitials. And when it all comes together of what it is, it feels kind of silly. It feels kind of pointless. That is probably the point of it. But the king of cameos, Matt Damon, is great. Pedro Pascal is in everything. I don't know if we're eventually going to get sick of that man. I'm not sick of him yet. He's wonderful in the opening of the movie. So
Coleman
yeah,
Domingo, who's just been nominated for an
oh yeah,
Oscar with
a
a
great
funny
villain.
wig and
Yeah.
hat, and like, yeah,
And
it's
Joey Slotnick and CJ Wilson are
yeah.
great in the movie as
Yeah,
well.
well, I mean, I know you're a big Twister fan, so seeing
Yeah.
Joey Slotnick again, he was actually recently in the Gerard Butler movie Plane. But they're a lot of fun, and it feels like there are certain mechanics in the plot that are very much Coen Brothers esque. And what you just said, I think, is important there because ultimately, when you watch a Coen Brothers comedy, something like this, or say Burn After Reading, you get to the end of the movie and even the characters begin to question, well, what was the point of all of this?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what this movie ultimately ends at. Like, it kind of feels a little bit like a Russ Meyer movie in that it is very raunchy with the sex. It's not afraid to show bodily fluids. It's not afraid to be vulgar. It's not afraid to be sexy and sensual and all of those things, which is appreciated, I think, because of the kind of the, showing it from the point of view of, you know, lesbian culture and lesbian sort of lifestyles and sort of being fun and outgoing, and not just simply kind of being a tragic story or one that is like, you know a token character. So all of
Yeah.
those aspects are there, and I don't want to get into it too much, but like you can read about, Ethan Coen and Trisha Cook's relationship, and that's also very progressive and fascinating in itself. And I think both of them are very much the authors of this movie, and it's not just simply Ethan Coen. Whether or not the Coen brothers get back together, there's conversations of them going back to a horror script that they've had written for a while that maybe they'll reunite. I know Ethan and Trisha Cook are working on a trilogy of queer themed films, with Honey Don't being their next one that they'll be working on this
So
year
like a
with.
thematic trilogy.
Yeah. So with Aubrey Plaza, and Margaret Qualley and Chris Evans in that next one. So, and like maybe that'll just kind of be like that their own little thing, and then they'll, Ethan will reunite with Joel Coen. But it's also fascinating to think about, okay, how do you compare this to the tragedy of Macbeth? Because the tragedy of Macbeth is a much sort of more straightforward adaptation of
For sure.
Shakespeare with some interjections of humor that's there. Stephen Root's character in the tragedy of Macbeth does feel very much like a Coen brother character in a Shakespeare adaptation, or the choice that Joel made to have Macbeth and Lady Macbeth be older instead of sort of younger adds something to the narrative. But in terms of comparing them one to one, Drive Away Dolls and the tragedy of Macbeth, I feel like you'd need like something that Joel Coen wrote himself in order to
Absolutely.
look
Yeah.
at like, okay, like how do these things line up, or don't. And what I will say about this, I'm mixed positive on it, but I find myself thinking about certain moments in the film that I keep laughing about, especially like line deliveries. There's a great line that Bill Camp has about like, "Will anybody save Curly?" That's just
Yeah. Yeah.
amazing, and so stuff like that I think really helps. And you look at The Big Lebowski. When The Big Lebowski was released, it was the follow up to Fargo. A lot of people didn't like that film when it first came out, and it was like, okay, well, this is completely
hmm
opposite of what we want, the follow up to Fargo to be. But
Yeah.
now you look at it, and it's considered to be
Yeah.
an all time classic. I don't know if Drive Away Dolls will be in the same category, but with the Coens, I feel that their movies, whether they're together or just Joel, only Ethan, their films get better on rewatches. So, or just appreciating them more over time,
Yeah, I don't
especially
disagree there. Yeah, because I'd even say with Llewyn Davis, Hail Caesar, and even Buster
A
Scruggs, like,
Serious Man, like, oh,
yeah,
is it with that around? A Serious Man, like
yeah,
they're all films that I think you need time to kind of ruminate on a little bit. Even like Burn After Reading,
yep.
I think has become
Took
like.
me a couple watches to actually really vibe with it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that was also very much the same with like following No Country for Old
yeah,
Men, right?
exactly.
So, as a road trip movie, it's pretty. It's not as like usually they're kind of shaggy dog stories, road trip films, where it's like they really take their time to get to the place that they're going, because it's always about the journey, not the destination. This is pretty much streamlined in terms of its narrative
Well,
from
like you said,
point
at
A to.
86 minutes, you don't got much time to
No, no,
kind
no,
of.
no. But it could have been longer. It could have been more like freewheeling and
Yeah,
and sort of about like living in the moment. But it really isn't. It's just more so about, okay, we're getting to point A to point B, but also we have this like s- this basic plot kind of coming in, which is a crime genre esque tone to it that kind of plays an important role in sort of the narrative, but also really isn't important to the character development, because you kind of also know where where Jamie and Marion's story is going, in terms of them like becoming a couple.
yeah,
Not that it's not really even a spoiler. Like you kind of know that it's like, okay, these two really are kind of perfect for each other, and it's just like
hmm
them figuring that out. So yeah, I think it's a 3.5 for me, like out of 5. Like I
okay,
don't think it's a masterpiece, but I think it's one of those films where comedy is such a subjective thing that when it works, it works. When it doesn't, it doesn't. And I laughed more at this than I would say about 80% of comedies that are being released today. But it
that's
also
fair.
does overstay its welcome when it comes to some of the bits where it's like, how far can we push this?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna give it a soft or maybe a silicone 3. I'm gonna I'm gonna give it, yeah, I think I'm still on the, like, mixed positive side. Like, I did mostly enjoy myself. Like, I don't feel strongly one way or another really, and I could go either way. But I didn't necessarily dislike it, and I didn't necessarily love it. Like, I'm still interested to see what, Trisha Cook and Ethan Cohen will do next. I mean, I will take a Cohen brother movie, whether it's Joel or Ethan or together, any day of the week. That's why I think this was one of the first films of 2024 I was looking forward to. And like you said, it seems like they always follow up their serious stuff or something that's a little bit more depressing or or hard with something that's a little silly. Like even after uh, they did Hail Caesar right after Lewin Davis, right? Is that,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and sometimes they'll do something that's almost harder to explain in there, that's more philosophical, like A Serious Man. For a lot of people, like, when it came out, they were decoding it as kind of like, oh, is this semi-autobiographical? Is this sort of,
yeah,
a part of their own childhood? And there are elements there, but you look at that movie, and that's a film within their sort of incredibly versatile and funny and quick-witted and dry sensibilities, that kind of feels almost, it's like its own thing. And again, like, it's easier for me to pick films that I don't like in their filmography, which is only really two. um
let me guess. Lady Killers
yep.
and I'm gonna go Hudsucker.
No, Hudsucker is
No.
great. Hudsucker, I like. Roger Deakins cinematography in that movie is
Oh
amazing.
yeah, and Sam Raimi
He
wrote that
co-wrote it,
with
yeah,
them, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and Paul Newman's awesome in it.
I
you know
haven't seen it in a very long time,
the
but
other oh, and Tim Robbins, like when he creates the actual hula hoop. No, it's Intolerable Cruelty, that kind of felt
oh
like.
yeah, yeah. No, that's a easy choice. I should have gone there. Yeah.
Yeah, and those are the ones where, like, there's still minor
They're
movies
fine, but yeah.
within their filmography, like you mentioned, Buster Scruggs. I think, like, the anthology narrative kind of is something we've always talked about on this show as being
Hit or miss,
hit
yeah.
or miss. But it's also funny thinking about, like, what you mentioned, where it goes the opposite of it starts out really funny, and then it goes darker and more depressing as each short is introduced. Like, you look at the Liam Neeson
Right. Oh
sequence or
god.
segment, and
Yeah.
how dark and disturbing that is. And then by the end of it, where you see these characters that are basically almost on, like, the Hades kind of chariot to hell in a way, and so, like, contemplating death and, like, what it means to die. And and you start off with Tim Blake Nelson in a Looney Tunes esque kind of a short film. So,
Yeah.
like, those are all elements that are there when it comes to their filmography, and you can see it very much in this as well. It's just that it's almost like maybe you need to take that script and do another pass on it, because it was something that was written a little while ago, and maybe at this point it's a little bit old hat. Maybe they've taken everything from that and put it in other things that work. So it just kind of almost feels like a fun exercise or a fun
Mhm.
little road trip
Yep.
down memory lane, I guess.
Yep. I'm with you. So it's a 3.5 from Eric and a 3 from me. Thank you all for listening or watching. We really do appreciate it. Eric and I are going to try to keep pumping out reviews now that, like, like we mentioned at the beginning of the show, beginning of the year, we decided, okay, maybe some of the stuff we don't need to review. But now as we kind of get into when, I think Dune Part 2 was the kickoff of the big movies this year. And that's, for most people, you haven't seen it yet. It comes out this week. It did have a sneak peek on Sunday, the 25th. So you guys can check out our Dune Part 2 review right now. It'll be spoiler free. And then if you want a spoiler filled review, I will be back on the Kind of Funny in review this Friday. That will go out as soon as we're finished. If you're a Kind of Funny member on Patreon or on YouTube, I believe you can watch it live. It'll be 6:30 Eastern. 3:30 Pacific. I'll be on there. But then now, as we're getting bigger and bigger movies, and the movies Eric and I really want to see, a lot of those movies that are on our most anticipated list and things like that, we'll have more and more reviews for you. We're still working on our concept for the reviews on the other channel, on Untitled Movie Reviews. Just a reminder, we've moved everything over to the Untitled Movie Podcast channel. And then reviews, we're still figuring out what we want to do over there. We have an idea. It's just a time-consuming idea. So it's I want to get to it. It's just it's so hard with me. I have a lot of work outside of this going on, so
Maybe when school ends, when you're done
yeah,
for the
or even when I
summer.
have a little bit more time, when things slow down a little bit, I want to work on something that's different for Eric and I. I mean, Eric's doing something similar, but different for us on this podcast. So we'll get back over there. But head over to our Letterboxd. Everything's over there, which is Untitled_movies. And you can follow me on all those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
And you can follow me on all the social medias at EM6211.
And we will have a new main episode of the Untitled Movie Podcast very, very soon. We're getting close to Oscar season, so whether we do a predictions episode or maybe we'll do one right after the Oscars, that probably makes more sense. And we'll talk a little bit about prescriptions. Prediction. We'll talk about all of our prescriptions on the newest episode.
We'll take off our tastemaker hats and put on our Oscar prognosticator hats.
So I think we'll talk a little bit about that, but what I mainly want to talk about is a vacation episode I've been wanting to do with Eric for a long time, where we talk about places you should travel to if you're a big movie fan, do some theme park reviews.
Or
Eric
if you're
will do a review, Sopranos piano bar, things like that. So that'll probably be on the next episode, which you guys can get soon. So keep an eye out for that. Until next time.
Will anybody save poor Curly?